An interesting thing happened to me the other week. I was scrolling on my YouTube, as many of us do, and a video popped up from Rabbi Tovia Singer, in which he took on the great argument, who says that the Oral Torah is from God? And he immediately responded with an off-the-cuff response. What an easy question. He debunked it very easily. Now, I didn't even want to watch this, but sometimes you just don't have a choice. You got to hear the arguments. And I wanted to see, did he really have any arguments? But of course, he actually did not have any arguments at all. And later that week, one of my followers on YouTube actually posted a video of him telling his audience that the caller on Rabbi Singer's program was in fact this man. And not only did they frame him as a Christian, when he himself is not a Christian, he's just Torah observant, so you can see how that works for Rabbi Singer's propaganda to say the Christians are the ones claiming that the Oral Torah is not true. But in addition to that, he's actually one of my followers, and he's the one who called in to ask that question. So I kind of took that as a sign from God that maybe this needs to be discussed. So in this video, I'm going to be responding to Rabbi Tovia Singer's attempt to prove the Oral Torah, and we'll see if he actually succeeds at doing that.
Be careful with this innovation. The innovation was make sure that you keep everything that's written, because that's a reflection. What was prior to that only known orally. Got it? People reverse that and think that the Oral Torah is some sort of later innovation. That's not the case. It's the written element that's the innovation.
It's the written that's the innovation. You see, the innovation is the written Torah. But of course, the Torah was originally oral. And what does he mean by that argument? Well, he explains in the video that what he means is the fact that God gave the Torah to Moses orally, because God didn't write the Torah, Moses wrote the Torah. God conveyed the Torah orally to Moses, and Moses wrote it down. So doesn't that mean that the Torah is really oral? And so originally the Torah was oral. And of course, the rabbis claim that Abraham studied the Oral Torah, but then when it was written down, that was the innovation. So the true Torah is oral. It's always been oral. The rabbis are the ones who are maintaining this Oral Torah, and you have to trust the Oral Torah of the rabbis, because that's the same Oral Torah that Moses knew. It's the same Oral Torah that Abraham had in his communication with God, that Noah had in his communication with God. Well, let's just settle this debate very easily. Yes, there were people who had communication with God prior to the Torah being given. And yes, Moses had the Torah communicated to him orally by God. But something changed at the time of the revelation at Sinai. And that is that the Torah became written. Moses wrote down the Torah. And he didn't open the door for future oral Torahs to be written. He didn't open the door for people to continue on this everlasting Oral Torah. In fact, he closed the door by God's command, saying that this Torah that God gave him is the Torah, and it's the final Torah. And actually, you may not add or subtract to this Torah. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2. You shall not add or subtract to these commandments. In addition to that, the Torah says multiple times that you have to follow everything that is written in this book. Nowhere does it say that you have to follow anything that's written outside of this book. In fact, if you were to follow things that were written outside of this book, you wouldn't be following the Torah. So let's read what is written in the book of Deuteronomy, the end of the book, chapter 31, verse 24. And it was, as Moses finished writing the words of this Torah upon a scroll until their completion. Which means that the Torah that was orally transmitted to Moses was put into writing until its completion. So there is no continuation of this Torah. There is no other Torah external to this writing. Once Moses finished writing the Torah, it was finalized. and remained finalized for all generations to come. So this claim of the rabbis, that they are somehow continuing this oral transmission from God to man in their endless interpretations and additions and subtractions to the Torah of Moses, is a complete fraudulent lie. And it's actually insane to think that they claim to be in the seat of Moses when in reality they're going against what Moses conveyed to the Jewish people in the name of God, which is that the Torah is final and it must be maintained as it is written without adding or subtracting to it. Now, just to address one of the very common, extremely low IQ arguments, something that comes from people who clearly have no understanding of the Hebrew language. This argument comes from Leviticus, the end of the book of Leviticus, chapter 26, verse 46. These are the decrees, the judgments, and the laws that Yahweh placed between him and the children of Israel at Mount Sinai in the hand of Moses. Well, the word for laws is Torot, plural of Torah, because Torah means law, and God gave laws to the children of Israel. Yet there are people who are stupid enough to use this as a source for the oral Torah. You see, because God gave Torahs, plural Torahs, to Moses. Plural meaning two, the written and the oral. Yeah, this is insane. This is top-notch stupidity at its finest. The decrees, the judgments, and the laws. The Torah is full of laws, commandments, decrees, judgments, ordinances. So there are many Torot, many laws in the Torah, in the book of the law. This is abundantly obvious for anyone who has half a brain cell and is willing to read with honesty. But for people that are just here to push propaganda points, out of context statements from the Torah in order to come to a predetermined conclusion that there is an oral Torah and that the rabbis hold the key to the truth of the Torah and you must obey them instead of obeying God, they will be the ones who push ideas like this. So in that same video that I showed you earlier from Rabbi Tovia Singer, he goes ahead and brings his very solid point, his very great proof that the Torah references commandments outside of itself.
The Torah says you should slaughter an animal in the manner that I have shown you, Deuteronomy 12:21, means you can't kill an animal anyway. So we know from Leviticus 11 what sort of animals are clean or permissible and which are forbidden. It doesn't tell us how to perform slaughter.
It doesn't tell us how to perform slaughter, you see, because we all know from the rabbis that there's a very special way of slaughtering. And the source is Deuteronomy 12:21. And you shall slaughter from your cattle and from your flocks as I commanded you. So the one time that the Torah seemingly references a command outside of the Torah, the Torah says you can slaughter from your sheep and your animals as I've commanded you. So there's a specific way to slaughter, and I've commanded you how to slaughter your animals outside of the Torah. Is that really what it's saying? What are the chances that this Torah, that is a self-contained book that only references itself, is saying, as I commanded you, in some secret special oral tradition that only Moses and the rabbis know? Well, let's actually read it in context. Again, instead of taking it out of context, let's see what the chapter is even talking about. The chapter is talking about God allowing people to eat meat outside of the temple. You see, in Leviticus chapter 17, God says you have to bring all of your domesticated animals as sacrifices in the tabernacle. Well, now, what Moses is telling the Israelites is that you're going to enter a land and not everyone's going to live right next to the tabernacle. So, in fact, you can eat meat wherever you want. Whenever your soul desires to eat meat, you shall eat meat. And that is what this chapter is about. It's allowing the Jewish people, the Israelite nation, to eat meat, specifically domesticated animals, because none of these laws even apply to wild animals, like a deer, for example. But specifically, your domesticated animals, cows, sheep, and goats, if you wanted to eat them outside of the temple, you can. You can eat them whenever your soul desires. So let's read that here. Deuteronomy 12:21. When the place that Yahweh your God chooses to place his name there, when that place is too far away from you, then you shall slaughter from your cattle and from your flocks that Yahweh your God has given you, as I commanded you, and you shall eat in your gates whenever your soul desires. So Where did God command us regarding the fact that we can eat from our flocks and our cattle whenever our soul desires? Not in the Oral Torah, actually, just a couple of verses previously. In verse 15 of this same chapter, it says, "However, whenever your soul desires, you may slaughter and eat meat in accordance with the blessing of Yahweh your God that he has given you in all of your gates. The pure person and the impure person can eat it together, as you can eat the deer and the hart." The deer and the hart, which are wild animals, which were allowed to be eaten outside of the tabernacle. Now God is allowing us to eat all of our animals, including our domestic animals, our sheep and our cows, our flocks and our cattle. God is now allowing us to eat everything outside of the temple. Whenever your soul desires to eat meat, you can eat meat. So in verse 21, when it says, "As I commanded you," it's referring to verse 15, because this is a continuation here of a commandment where God is teaching us about how to eat our animals and that we're allowed to eat it outside of the temple. So it turns out that an entire chapter that's coming to give allowance to the people to be free and to eat meat whenever their soul desires was taken to be the source for the external commandment of shechita, the rabbinic slaughter, that now does not allow you to eat meat from anyone other than a rabbinically kosherized meat factory where they tell you exactly how it has to be done. So you can't go anywhere and eat a cow, or you can't have a steak anywhere. No, you have to go from the kosher butcher and you have to go to the kosher rabbi. Well, what do you think is the reason for that? Money, power, control. Okay, these people are corrupt, extremely. And at the end of the day, all they're doing is bringing in everything into their power base. When God is telling us to be free, he gives us the list of animals to eat in Leviticus 11, as Rabbi Singer mentioned. Yes, that's all you need to know, which animals you can eat. Split hooves, choose its cud, it's kosher. That's all the Torah ever says about which animals you're allowed to eat. So for all these statements about the external commandments and the external Torah, the oral Torah, that's not the written Torah, this is non-existent. The written Torah is a final document. It's been given by the mouth of God, written down by the hand of Moses. That's the Torah. Nothing else is the Torah. All of us can sit here and have conversations about the Torah, but guess what? The rabbi's opinion is no more valid than yours, unless he can demonstrate it with logic, proof, and reason. But the idea that you should listen to the rabbi just because he said so, and he has the title rabbi, is extremely counterproductive and corrupt to the extreme. So take back your freedom, read the Word of God, study life, make valid judgments, run your opinions by others, have debate, have conversation. Don't just think that the conversation has ended 2,000 years ago with the rabbis of the Talmud. We are all commanded to know the Torah, to discuss it, and no, there is no Torah outside of the 5 books of Moses, the scroll that Moses wrote until its completion, that has been preserved until today, that has been preserved for thousands of years. And thank God we have this. Thank God we have this clarity, and it would be a shame to lose that clarity for the confusion that man tries to introduce.